long time ago, before I even touched a pad controller in my life, I was a guitar player. I studied jazz and pop guitar at the conservatory for 4 years. And in the 4 years that I studied there, I think I became a pretty decent player, right? I put in a lot of hard work and dedication and it paid off. But after the conservatory, I actually stopped practicing guitar altogether, and I should maybe make a separate video about this one day. But the reason for that, to summarize, is that I basically put so much pressure on myself, and I made it such a big deal to become the best player ever, that I sort of ruined the fun of guitar playing for myself. I totally ruined the love for the instrument, and that's the reason that I stopped practicing guitar. However, I didn't lose my love for making music and producing creative stuff, which led me into making musical theater shows and, for example, become more interested in music production, which then in turn led me to become a finger drummer, or basically introduced me into finger drumming for a lot of practical reasons. And I made a video about that a while ago, actually, how I got into finger drumming. But with that said, this summer I realized, hey, I've been finger drumming for 7 years. And I also realized, hey, I have not been playing or practicing guitar for over 7 years now. And I also realized that I actually became a better guitar player over the past 7 years in some aspects. And that's all because of what I learned with finger drumming. And in this video, I'd like to explore that a little bit. So the core thing that, in my opinion, fueled my growth on the guitar is, perhaps unsurprisingly to you, the improvements in timing and groove that I made by practicing finger drumming. Because the thing about drums is that they're way more brutal and way more unforgiving, in the sense that small deviations in timing will make you sound like an amateur very, very quickly. And one of the main reasons as to why that is has to do with something that I personally like to call the broadness of sound. If we take a hi-hat pattern like this, for example, and we take a guitar strumming pattern like this, for example, and if we put those two sounds side by side in a DAW and we analyze them, if you look at the waveform of the hi-hat, you see that it starts very quickly. It has a very steep transient, and it also ends almost right away. So it's very, very short. And if you now look at the guitar waveform, you can see like, okay, there's a transient there, but it's less steep. And also the sound doesn't disappear as quickly, which makes a guitar hit broader than a hi-hat hit. And that is why the hi-hat hit, in a way, has to be placed more exact than the guitar hit. Because of its shortness, it allows for less deviation before it becomes noticeable that you're messing things up. Now, the more you move towards playing funky stuff on your guitar, the more you move towards these steeper transients and shorter hits, which is one of the reasons why practicing funk guitar is so good for your timing as a guitar player. But with that said, the drums are even more brutal. The transients are steeper, the sounds can be even shorter, and that is why practicing finger drumming, or drumming for that matter, takes it to a whole new level in terms of timing and exact placements of notes. Okay, but wait a minute. Some of you might be asking yourselves now, hey, sorry, but guitar playing is this, right? And finger drumming is this. So how can practicing this improve this, right? Well, the fallacy in that way of thinking is that you assume that the biggest hurdle to overcome in terms of, improving your timing is motoric. Whereas that's not 100% true. It's both true and false at the same time, actually. It is true that you have to develop your motor skills in order to be able to execute everything you need to execute with your hands at the exact right time. And in that sense, this is not the same thing as this. But with that said, how do you determine when to move your hands, right? Whether it's like this or like this. Well, you do that up here or here. You do that with your own inner sense of time. And that brings me to the second thing that finger drumming taught me that I wasn't really aware of before, which is something that I like to call the continuous strumming hand conspiracy. Now, of course, this is not actually a conspiracy. Or is it? No, it's not. It's not. It's not a conspiracy. It's completely logical as to why this is happening. I was a guitar teacher for many, many years, and I've taught the continuous strumming hand thing to many, many students. What it basically boils down to is this, is that when you're playing guitar, when you're strumming chords, you always have to keep moving your hand to the beat. Even when you're not playing anything, you basically just move your hand in the air to the beat, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then when you want to make a sound, you move your hand so that it actually hits the strings. This is the way you teach it, and it's also the right way to teach things because, first of all, it's what creates that authentic strumming guitar sound, which we all want to be able to reproduce, right? And second of all, it helps beginning students to keep time because you have this nice physical, almost like a metronome type of thing that helps you stay grounded as to where you are in the measure. It helps you with syncopated rhythms where you have to move your hand upwards because 1, 2, 3, 4 will be, easier to play because of that. So yeah, it's great. The continuous strumming hand motion, there's nothing wrong with it besides the fact that it's 100% tied to physicality. It links timing and placement of notes to physicality. And it wasn't until I started finger drumming that I became aware of the limitations of that. If you think about finger drumming, for example, it's definitely possible to get some physicality in, especially if you have a continuous hi-hat pattern going. You can move your hands up and down like a machine and therefore keep time that way. But as soon as that continuous hi-hat pattern falls away, you don't have that same thing that you have with the guitar strumming pattern because you cannot move your hands in the air with finger drumming. You either hit something or you don't. And if there's a break or something, you don't do anything. And you do have to come in on the one at the exact right time. And the same thing goes for sparse beats, where it's slow beat, where there's a lot of space between the notes. You cannot fill up that space with movement. You just have to be able to actually play those slow notes. And I think a lot of guitar players will never get to the point where they start developing the inner clock 100% from here. They will always keep linking their playing to physicality with their hand motions, with their foot tappings and stuff like that. And the reason for that is obvious, right? You can get to 80, maybe 90% of what's possible on the guitar and timing by just linking everything to physicality. But if you're talking about great guitar players like Wayne Krantz, Mark Lettieri, Corey Wong, Leonardo Amuedo, just to name a few. Those are the players that if you hear them, there's something magical going on in terms of how they place their notes. It's so good, it's so consistent, it's so together. Those people, either consciously or unconsciously, have really worked on the timing up here and in here on their inner clocks, and they're beyond just physicality. And there's not that many guitar players that I found around the world or that I heard around the world that really developed this, but the ones that I just named definitely did. And I'm glad that I was forced to start developing this because obviously one of the beautiful things about developing timing up here and in here is that it's not tied to physicality. So whether you're doing this or this, that doesn't matter. You can translate everything that's up here to any other instrument and sure, work on your physicality a little bit so that you can execute the motions well. But I can take this to the saxophone, right? I can take this to my voice, to any other instrument that I might want to learn in the future. By the way, I'll leave some links to videos and stuff that I made about the inner clock and how to develop it over here or there or, everywhere. Just go look for it and you'll find it. And that way you can get started with developing this stuff right away. And the third and final way that finger drumming definitely improved my guitar playing is that I've learned to listen and lock in better with the drum parts. And I'm specifically saying parts because we're thinking about drums usually as one instrument, right? We have guitar, we have bass, and we have drums. But obviously drums, plural, are usually multiple parts. It's a kick drum part, it's a snare drum part, it's a hi-hat part. And by playing drums yourself and improving your own playing on the drums, you're definitely zooming in and focusing on all of those different parts separately. So you're working on getting a nice powerful kick drum in, and you're working on getting some nice well-placed subtle snare ghost notes in, and you're working on getting that hi-hat consistent, which forces you to really listen to that hi-hat and also to how that hi-hat interacts with the other kit pieces on the drums. And when you did that for a while, and then you're playing guitar, you're playing together with the drum part, all of a sudden your brain will zoom in on that kick drum part, right? It will zoom in on those subtle hi-hat notes or those subtle ghost notes on the snare. And in your playing, you will all of a sudden really start to lock in with all of those parts instead of sort of hearing the drums as one big blob that sort of keeps time, right? And I don't know if any of you ever watched interviews with great musicians or great drummers. I definitely have. And more than once I've heard a drummer give a compliment to a great guitar player, like for example, John Scofield or something. And then the drummer would say something like, yeah, when I'm playing with John, I feel that he's completely in sync with my hi-hat or something. And that's one of the biggest compliments in terms of timing I think a drummer can give a guitar player. And it also doesn't happen that often, right? So if you work on your drum parts, finger drumming, and you lock in with this type of stuff, really lock in a next level way, in a way that the drummer will start to hear like, whoa, this guy is actually listening to every single separate part I'm playing, then yeah, you've definitely gained some incredible skill. I can highly recommend this video about the Gap Click app that I did a while ago. I also have a course on questforgroove.com called Time and Time Again that you might want to look into at some point. I give all kinds of tricks on how to develop this stuff and how to become a better finger drummer, but basically a better musician by improving your timing. Have a great day and see you around.